Hi, my name is Rocky Rains, and welcome to True Tales of the Supernatural. Tonight I have as my guest Linda Richey. And Linda, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Um, Currently I live in Brownstown, not far from where I grew up, and I'm retired now from the Food and Drug Administration. I worked
Okay.
for Washington for 32 years in criminal
Wow.
investigations, and it was a great career. I'm very happy to be retired. I love being retired, and
Yes.
um I think my greatest thing right now is I've always had a love of animals. I'm not going to tell you how many cats I have and dogs, and I have horses, and I just, I've always loved the country and nature. So I'm very content in that.
Very good. That sounds awesome. Sounds like you got a good life for yourself there.
Yes, I do.
Well, I know you told me quite a few stories of different things, strange things, and supernatural things that happened to you throughout your life. So, if you want to start with like maybe the earliest one you remember, and then we can just move on from there,
Yeah, I
move on
was
into
thinking,
them.
yeah. Let's start way back.
Okay.
Uh, Okay, the first inkling I knew of anything supernatural or anything out of the ordinary, if you will,
Hmm.
was my father telling me about my grandmother and her sisters. There were a family of 11 farmers, and 9 sisters, 2 brothers, and the sisters would get together at my grandmother's house, and the kids were ushered out of the house. Now, my dad told me, being the stinker that he was,
Yeah.
that he climbed up on the shoulders of a couple other kids to peek through the window. And he told me these stories. Uh, oh my gosh, I had to be in my 30s then. No, no, 20s. But in any event, when he peeked in the window, they were raising the table off the ground. And,
Ah,
and I did not know any of this. I wish I could have talked with my grandma to find out those things. And it
yeah.
scared him. It scared him to death. But when the women got together, the kids were ushered outside. So that's my earliest recognition that my family had some, I don't know if you call it abilities. And I was really, really surprised. And my grandma got ill, uh, and I was about 22. And she kept telling me, "Oh, Linda," I was very, very close to her. She was just an angel. And she says, when I pass, I'm going to come back and let you know
Okay.
I'm okay. And I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. It terrified me to death, and she thought it was funny. She was always a spookster, hiding in the bushes and scaring me. She loved a good laugh.
Wow.
And I was always a chicken. And I said, Grandma, please don't do that. And she says, Oh, I'm going to come back. I love you so much. I'm going to let you know I'm okay. Well, as it was, she passed. I was a couple months pregnant at that time with my daughter, and I
Yeah.
had this townhouse. And when you walked in, you immediately had to go upstairs. All your living quarters was upstairs, so you had to flick this light on. The light would go on. It was attached to the bottom of the stairs, that light to the top of the stairs.
Yeah.
So when you clicked it on, it went on simultaneously.
Oh,
And then
okay.
when you got up to the top, you would just flip the switch down. So she had passed. And of course, I was devastated. I loved her to death. And I stayed at uh, her house for the funeral and stuff, but I came back home. I lived alone, and I flipped the switch on to go upstairs. And I got upstairs, and before I could do anything, the light downstairs went off and the one upstairs stayed on. And I thought, oh, I need a new light bulb. Uh, I got to
Okay.
have someone come and put these light bulbs in. So the next day, I go down the stairs, and the one upstairs goes off and the one downstairs comes on. And
Wow.
so then I'm still thinking, I want to be logical about this, but I'm getting scared. And I left that day and I came back and it happened a third time. And I said, as I was walking midway up the stairs, Grandma, if that's you, you're scaring me. Please stop. And both lights flickered and then they went back to their normal, both on at the same, both off at the same. So I
Right.
knew it was my grandma, but it terrified me. It really did. It
Wow.
brought me comfort, but it also scared me because I've always been a chicken at heart with those types of things.
Yeah.
So as time went on and my pregnancy went on, and of course I'm crying a lot. I miss her. And my grandma had, you know how people are recognized by scents? We wear the same perfume for 50
Yes.
years.
Yeah.
My grandma always used rose water and Jergens almond lotion. So she had a
Wow.
distinct smell and it was a beautiful smell. But in any event, one night I'm laying in bed and I'm just sobbing. I need my grandma and I'm scared. And she had a way of patting my back. And all of a sudden, my clothes are pressing down. I saw the handprints, but it was so comforting. And the scent that I smelled was my grandmother.
Aw.
And I was
Wow.
so comforted by that because that was reassuring, that was love, and I felt really good. It helped me in a hard time in my life. But when I was about 9, we used to live in the city, in the subdivision in Taylor. My dad decided to move us out in the country, and he bought 20 acres. It wasn't developed; it was woods and whatever. And they built their house on there, and then he built the barn, and it was a very big barn. It was a good sized piece of property, and he cleared a lot of it up, the first 10 acres probably, and in the back was woods. But then there was a neighbor that moved next door to our property that my family knew, and he just put up a very fancy barn dominium, I guess you would call it. And he
Okay.
carved out some of his woods that butted up to our woods. So I had horses and ponies, and I would ride through these woods. But I get to one point crossing our woods into his woods that animals sense things. My horse would
Right.
freak out and I just didn't feel right in this one section of woods, and we would just gallop through it and get out of these woods. But it was a
Wow.
short way for us to get through and get where we wanted to go. So we had lived there maybe 2 or 3 years, and my father experienced it was fall time, and I want to say it was October or September, but the leaves were changing, it was getting cold, and it was fall. My father woke up one night, Rocky, and he heard a woman screaming like she was being murdered. And he
Wow.
got up, he got in his truck. He didn't wake any of us up. My father is a very level-headed man. I mean, this scared him that someone was being hurt in those woods. And he drove out there, drove around. You could go through the woods because this was a nice trail for vehicles. And the screaming I don't know how long it went on, but he was out there listening to it and could not find the woman. The next morning when we all got up, my dad, he was still fumbling with his cigarettes and very upset, Rocky. And
Yeah.
he said to us, "Didn't we hear that woman screaming?" And we're all like, "No." And, I'm thinking he had a bad dream, something's going on. Well, as it was, uh, the next couple years, he was the only man in the house. My other brother went to California, and my baby brother was little. So every year in the fall, without fail, he would hear this woman screaming, and
Wow.
he would still go looking. Well, it became an event that you knew something was supernatural. And
Right.
and
Yeah.
and he named her the Indian Princess. Our area had, when they were doing lots of arrowheads, lots of artifacts when they dug up to level
Okay.
the land and whatever have you. And you know, down this way it was always a lot of, downriver is full of history of
Yes.
Indian tribes. So
Yeah.
he named her that. I don't know what that was, but he called her that. And my older brother came back from California, and it was fall that first year. My father didn't hear it that year, which was shocking because this has been like 5 years in a row.
Right.
My brother heard it.
Your
And
brother heard it.
my brother
Wow.
heard it. My father did not hear it. And he got up and he went running. You know, you always have little shotguns and stuff in the country. And
Right.
he's
Yeah.
really thinking some woman is being hurt because he never heard it before. And he goes running and he's going through the woods and he's hearing this screaming and he can't find anything. So that day when my father got up and my brother told him, it was the first year that my father hadn't heard this. So
Wow.
then as time goes on and my brother moved away, and my baby brother was very young. My father passed at 55, but until
Oh,
time that he passed, after my brother left the house, my father continued to hear this without fail every fall.
wow.
So it just, the women never heard it. We never heard a thing. And it was something that really unnerved him. And I wish we could have ever found out what had occurred on that, in that woods or on that
Right.
property. My brother moved away, my baby brother, as my father was deceased, then my mother moved to Florida. But that had always happened while they had the property. And I wonder now if anyone else hears it out at, you know, out in that area.
That would
Um,
be something if you were able to check into that to see if that was still going on, to who was living there now, if they were still hearing this out there. And I
right,
find that
right.
fascinating that it was only the men that heard that.
It was
That's
only the men.
yeah. Wow.
And and like I say, my father was very level-headed, and it just, I mean, the first couple of years he was just beside himself. We never did find out, but as time went on, and while my father and all of us still lived out there, the
Yeah.
barn that he built was, you know, you don't put your barns real close to the house, so it was a nice little walk out there. And I was the only one with the animals, and it's dark, and you have to go out and take care of that livestock before you go to school
Right.
and those
Yeah.
types of things. I always had a funny feeling with that barn, that area the barn was on. And then, unbeknownst to me, and I'll tell you about my mother's experience, I started hearing on the second floor of the barn, when you would walk into the barn, the steps would be on your left going up to the second floor. You had to go past those steps to leave the barn.
Okay.
And so you were kind of like, to me, in my mind, I felt trapped because I started hearing someone upstairs in that barn. I'm out there at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning by
Yeah.
myself, feeding the horse, doing the chickens. And I kept hearing this distinctive step, drag. And at first I'm like, okay, Linda,
Yikes.
get it together. But then, Rocky, it would make its way over to the top of that stairs, and coming to those stairs. And the only thing, I'm sorry, the only thing that I could do is I would run out of that barn past those stairs, never look up there,
Oh
get to
yeah.
the house.
Yeah.
But back in those days, now I wish I would have said something to my father. My mother was the type, she wasn't a type of mother that you could really share those types of things with. And that's why I'm saying later in life, I wish we both would have known we had the same experiences, because that went on for I don't know how many years. And there were incidents where I would be in the barn and you have your hay stacked way up, and all of a sudden the hay would come flying off at me, the bales.
Whoa.
And those are 50-pound bales. And it's
Yeah.
not like cat knocked them over. There was a raccoon up there. It's just me, the horses, and the hay.
Yeah.
And so I started taking the dogs out with me. Well, I don't know who got to the door the fastest, me or the dogs, when we were trying to leave the barn. We were running neck and neck. And so, of course, as time goes on and, you move away and stuff, it wasn't until probably a year or two before my mother passed that we were sitting around talking about those types of things. And she looked at me when I said there was always something wrong in that barn because somebody had a wooden leg or it was an odd walk. And she
Yeah.
looked at me and she turned white as a sheet. And I never knew my mom. She didn't share a lot. And she said, was it step drag? And I said, yes, like he had a wooden leg or, and
Wow.
she said, Linda, I had that same experience when I was a little girl. So we started comparing notes because my grandfather had horses. They lived out in a rural area. And, it was a big deal if you could be left at home while mom and dad went to the store.
Right.
So
Yeah.
she wanted to prove to them, look, I'm old enough. I can stay in the house. It was a very small house and it had a crawl space walk up. It was a ranch type thing. And the crawl space walk thing was in the kitchen. So as soon as my grandmother and grandfather left for the store, of course she gets scared because she's all alone and it's her first
Yeah.
time. And she
Yeah.
said she decided she's going to go sit in the kitchen and watch for the car coming down the road. And she starts hearing this step, drag. And now
Mm.
the the ability to pull that staircase down, you could pull it down in the kitchen, but if you were up there and it was spring loaded, you could also push it down if you were up there.
Yeah.
And she said it came right to the opening and she took off. She got out of the house, but just about then my grandparents pulled up and she, of course, never told them about it. And she said it happened more than once. When they would leave, it would happen to her. And
Wow.
so for it to happen to me 30 years later, 40 years
That's
later, it's like the exact same thing. And I said, my God, did this thing follow you from that area to out in the country, Mom? Because we had the same noise.
yeah.
And of course, she passed, but we were both shocked by it. And I wish we would have shared more about those things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you tend to watch who you share with because then they label you
Right.
a little bit.
Yeah.
And gosh, what can I say? The experiences have been probably my whole life. And I know I wanted to share some of the other things that I went through. We had the problem at the property, but at the property, my parents, I know what I wanted to share. They
Okay.
had a tri-level and
Okay.
you had your upper level with bedrooms, you had your main level with the kitchen and whatever. And down in the basement, those windows in a tri-level were level to the ground. So the windows, you're down in the ground and the windows are at head height, but you're really, when you look out, you're level with the ground.
Right.
And
Okay.
there was a bedroom down there. And as things went on, I was the one that moved to the basement bedroom, and there was a family room and there was a spare room. And as you walked through the hallway to go up the stairs to the main floor, you have all these windows. And it started probably in my teens, along with the step drag stuff,
Yeah.
tapping on the windows, tap, tap, tap on my bedroom windows. And I would like peek out because I've always been a chicken and I could never see anything. And then it got more aggressive. As I would try to leave that bedroom, the tapping would continue in the family room as I'm walking to get to the stairs. It was following
It
me,
was following
tap,
you. Wow.
and tapping on every window. And I'd get upstairs and I'd go in the living room, I'd shut the drapes, and I'd hear tapping on this, the huge picture windows, they called them back then. And I would stay there and terrified and by myself till the sun came up. And that went on for years. But the weird thing about that is that it would follow from window to window as I moved. And my older sister had moved back home with her baby. This was during the Vietnam era, and my
Okay.
brother-in-law was drafted, and she came home
Okay.
with the baby. It wasn't just me. It couldn't have been just in my head, because she started experiencing it.
The same
Down in that
thing.
bedroom. I went back in another bedroom so she could have that with my niece. And she
Okay.
would hear this tap, tap, tapping. Well, this one night I used to babysit for, back then you did that to get a little,
Right.
and I had to go babysit up in town for this couple. And I didn't feel well. And Gail said to me, my sister said, well, I'll go babysit for you tonight. It's okay. I'll go. And I said, well, wonderful. She got to the house. She's sitting there. They left. She's there with the little baby, watching television, and the tapping on the windows.
Starts at,
And at
wow,
the house that I was supposed to be
to
at that night.
babysit at.
Now, how weird is that? She
That's
called me up. Yeah. And I'm like, she said, Linda, this tapping is going on here. And she said, this bright light. Now, you would think it was a person, Rocky, but I am telling you, every time my brother would open a window real quick to catch someone, when I would tell him there's tapping on the windows, never could find anyone, something shone brightly in the living room on her. And the minute she was telling me that on the phone, whatever it was made it back in 5 seconds, because it wasn't me. And it started tapping on the windows in the living room. And she could hear it, and I could hear it. And I'm standing in the kitchen trying to huddle under the telephone desk that we had. That whatever it was had went there, seen it wasn't me,
and come
and
back.
came back.
Ooh.
And that went on until, of course, I left home. And we kept all of those kind of things between us until many, many years later.
Yeah.
The tapping, my brother would just bust out of the house when I said I heard it, and you could never find anything. It was very shocking, scary,
Yeah, it's
whatever.
scary. Yeah, that's definitely scary. Boy,
And
that gives me the willies. Wow.
when you try to make sense of things. And I
Yeah.
remember my parents, they'd go to Florida to visit my grandparents, and the neighbor kids, we were all friends, country kids. And this one night, you have to lock the chicken coop up and put them all away for the night because of weasels and stuff. And I remember being scared because the chicken barn was way out. And my neighbor friend, he was a couple years younger than me, all of us country kids. He stayed in the car while I went to walk up to that barn to shut the door and just latch it for the chickens for the night. And all of a sudden the latch came undone, the door hit me in the face.
Wow.
And I took off running for the car to drive back up to the house, and he's locked all the car doors, and I'm screaming and yelling, let me in, because I want to get to the house.
Holy
And
smoke.
after that, I would put the chickens up before dark. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I really don't know. It had to be something. I don't know what it was, Rocky. If I could tell you what it was, I'd tell you.
But this is
Um,
all at the house that your parents, most of these occurrences happened in that house, correct?
in that house they built on in the country on 20 acres. Now, of course, my grandma's stuff happened, and back then telegraph was a dirt road, and
Right.
she
Yeah.
her house is 100 and some years old now. It was the first little two roads in Taylor. It was very rural. And
Right.
so I just know that these things had happened throughout my life.
That's a
And
trip.
yeah, it was. And you kind of, like I say, and you would know, people would make fun of you. And I really thought my mother would get mad when I brought that up. And then
Yeah.
she turned white and she looked at me and she said, that happened to me when I was a kid. So whatever it was, I think it followed her.
Well, I think it was attached to yeah, it definitely followed her and then it was following you,
Following
you
me. And
know? Yeah.
I don't know. There were just so many things. I know there were other, gosh, huh? Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Rocky.
That's okay.
Yes, I have to tell you. My father passed at 55 very suddenly. My mother
Okay.
was 49. Um, I was 27. And my mother, of course, being that young, he'd had a heart attack, and unfortunately they revived him when they shouldn't have. And to make a long story short, he finally passed in the hospital. And I stayed out at that house probably for a week with my mom. She's devastated, didn't see
Of
this
course.
coming.
Yes.
My baby sister and brother were 17 and 18. And so my mom and dad had twin beds, and I went up and I slept in my dad's bed. Now, my dad, when he was 16, he had a horrible, horrible motorcycle accident.
Oh,
Uh, and his leg, he almost lost it. It was just pinned right back together, and that leg always bothered him. So I'm laying in his bed and I'm asleep, and my mother's asleep, and all of a sudden, it was his right leg. My right leg felt like somebody was sawing it off. And I
oh,
jumped up and I couldn't walk, and I'm hollering. My mother grabbed me, my younger brother grabbed me. They literally had to walk me around for about 45 minutes. My leg, I'd never had pain like that in my leg. And my mother
wow.
said, that's your father's. He had his. So now I'm scared again. And I'm like, okay, Dad, if that's you, he died. It was a sudden thing, a heart attack and whatever. And he was young. And so I stayed there and for a few more days, helped my mother out. And I was sitting in the living room looking outside, and in the country, you don't close all your drapes at night. You don't do this and that. And I'm looking out, and the reflection in the big living room window, I saw my father. And I turned because I said, there, you know what, Linda? I turned and I saw him, and he floated
Wow.
from the upstairs, his bedroom, the stairway down into the kitchen. But the thing that he didn't, it was only from his waist up. And
Oh,
he
okay.
was walking just, I mean, everybody has a certain walk. And my dad always wore coveralls. He had his coveralls on, and he was walking through the kitchen. Well, I let out a holler and everybody came running, and I was frozen in my steps because when I turned, I still saw him. He was heading out through the kitchen. And I said, Mom, I just saw Dad come through here. And of course, that hit home for her. And so I was terrified to go home to my apartment. And I'm like, what is Dad trying? What's going on? And so
Yeah.
I stayed there a few more days. But Rocky, I started having dreams every night. I slept in my dad's bed. I said, look, Dad, I know you're around. Something is going on. Every night I kept dreaming. Now, there was a set of numbers I can't tell you because it's been 40 years. He told me these numbers over and over again. And I got up. I said, Mom, I keep dreaming this set of numbers. And he built their first house. He was 5 years older than my mother. So when she got out, and the house is still standing there, it's beautiful. It was an address of a farmhouse down from them. Now, what he was trying to tell me, I was less than a year old when they left that house. So there's no way I would have known any of this. And she said, that was so and so's farm. And I said, that's the address? And she said, yeah. And I said, I don't know what he's trying to tell us. Well, as it was, the next night, he's trying to tell me about the furnace. And you have propane gas out in the country. They had
Yes.
that big pig, you call it a pig, and it's full of gas. And he
Right.
keeps telling me not to turn the heat on. Now, he died in the fall, and you got to turn the heat on. Don't turn the furnace on. I kept dreaming that every night. And I said, Mom, there's got to be something wrong with this furnace. I'm sorry, but I've dreamt it every single night. Dad is talking about it. And she didn't, you don't have a lot of money to call serviceman. And my dad was a self-do-it guy. He built their
Right.
houses, he built their barn, he fixed stuff. He's telling me there's something wrong with the furnace. She called a guy out, and lo and behold, and I don't know when it happened, Rocky. I don't know what happened, but there was something in the furnace that was either disconnected, backwards, crooked. And the guy said to my mother, you are so lucky you did not turn this furnace on, because it would have gone through the propane thing to the storage thing out there, the pig. He said your house would have blown up.
Wow.
And my mother,
Oh,
yes, we both looked at each other. And I don't pretend to be a psychic or I just
yeah.
know, I believe if something is keeps telling you, you kind of need to say, okay, maybe we should check
Yeah.
on this. And this,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and this guy, it was something in the furnace the year he died. And I don't know what it was, because my dad would always set the furnace up for fall. But he told my mother, had you ignited this to start it, the house would have blown up. So those are the main incidents that they shaped me. I believe anybody that tells me those
Right.
things. I believe in following your instincts, they call them, or
Yes. Yeah.
and I don't make fun of that stuff. But my
No.
father, he was the only one, he's the only spirit that I have seen.
Okay.
But I
Well, you've
have
heard other spirits, but yeah, you've heard other ones.
I've heard them, yes, and I
Yeah.
felt them. And I have to tell you one last story.
Okay.
As a young mother with a little girl, and I wanted a house, and I was working in nursing then before my government career. And one of my nurse friends, her grandma had a house on the outskirts of Detroit in Polish Town.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
what we call it back then, Hamtramck,
Yeah.
Polish,
Shramic.
yeah, German area.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was the cutest little pink house. It was, and Carrie, her grandma, was in the nursing home, and she said, Linda, we'll make you a deal. You can have the house, all the furniture. And I was thinking, oh, I can plant a garden. I've got a baby. I'm going to go over and see this house. This is a wonderful opportunity. So I drove over there. I had the keys to the house, and I walked up the walkway to the front porch, and I stopped dead in my tracks, and I looked upstairs in the windows up there, and there was a middle window, and I felt something staring back at me. I didn't see it, I felt it, and I turned
Okay.
right back around, got in my car, and I called my girlfriend up. Now, see, Rocky, she had never told me any history on this house ever.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I said, Jerry, what happened in that house? I didn't go in the house. I felt something in that middle window. And, Jerry was, oh, for God's sakes, Linda. And I said, what happened? I don't want the house. I'm sorry. It was a great opportunity. It was beautiful, cute little house. And Carrie, her grandma, back in the 30s and 40s, they made money off of extra bedrooms, if you will. They would rent to boarders,
Okay.
travelers back then. And Carrie rented rooms out of the second floor. And this one gentleman rented a room from her. And she used to call them to come down. She'd go to the bottom of the stairs to go out and she'd yell for them to come down because she'd feed them breakfast and stuff. And he did not come down.
Oh,
And
okay.
she went up there and he had hung himself in his bed
Oh,
in front. The window that I felt something was the window he hung himself at.
oh my goodness.
And and of course, my girlfriend, she just thought this was a wonderful opportunity for me. She got mad at me. She said, and of course, you hear the you're crazy type thing. I said, how can I be crazy when I felt it and I
Right,
couldn't go in that
exactly.
house? You didn't tell me about this man. And she said, well, my grandmother never had any problem. That doesn't mean anything. It
No.
does. People have sensitivities.
Right,
And
exactly. Yeah.
yes, and so that was an opportunity I passed up gladly.
Yeah,
And
yeah. If you were
yeah,
already aware of it, yeah, you don't want to take the chance.
I'm not going, no, and I
Yeah,
don't know
no.
how to clear spirits out. Now, my grandmother, I will tell you, her house, when she passed, I wanted it because of the memories, but I don't know what all they did in that house, but my mom was dating my dad. Now they're raising the table. I didn't know my grandma could do that.
That's called
And her
table
sisters.
tipping. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
you
that that
told
is a
me
thing. Yeah, it's
that.
called table tipping. Yeah.
And I don't know what else they were um, partaking in, if you will. But my
Hmm.
mother was 16 dating my dad. And the first time she went to that house, she told my father, see, I think my mother had sensitivities that she pushed away. And she told my dad she didn't like the house. She did not like the house.
Wow.
As it went on, all of us, when we would go to my grandma's house, it was a beautiful little old house. But I am telling you, you would feel like the bathroom was on the first floor. My dad, they never put the second floor bathroom in. There's one now, but you'd have to run down in the middle of the night from the bedrooms, and you would feel like you were having to push through people, like to
Oh,
get
wow.
to the bathroom. And you'd be in
Wow.
the bathroom, and I would feel like somebody's right at my face. I can't see them, and then I'd run back upstairs. My mother never liked the house. My sisters and none of us, I loved the house because my grandma represented something to me. And they talked me out of buying it when she passed. My mother said, I don't want you in that house. I don't. Well, as it is, and what I've read, they redid that whole inside of that house. It lost its charm and character to me. But I went in there, I saw a realtor there one day, and I wanted my grandson to see the house.
Right.
And we went in, and I am telling you, Rocky, there was no residual feeling of something being in there. It was
Okay.
gone. And I don't know with all the construction or what all happened, but it was just now an old house. But all those years from the time my mom was 16, I mean, and then you're looking at your grandkids and whatever, and they never liked that house.
Wow.
And yes, my daughter's telling me she had the same experience in it. So you're looking at grandchildren and great grandchildren that I don't know if they opened something when they were doing whatever they were doing. And I wish I would have known this because I would have loved to have talked to my grandma about those
Right,
things.
exactly. Yeah.
But when you don't know
That's
what you're doing, I think things can happen. Things
yeah.
can come in. And
Well,
yeah, my
yeah.
daughter just said, yeah, she had the same experience in that house.
Well,
And
it sounds like your whole family is like sensitive to the spiritual side of life, to things that, maybe other people are not so aware of. It sounds like you guys have like a special sense about it, and um especially with your grandmother, and just you telling me the story about your dad looking through the window when he's a little boy and seeing them doing the table tipping. I mean, I imagine that would really shake you up, if you're young and you're seeing this and it's your own
Yes.
mother that's doing it,
Her and
so
and the sisters. And
oh yeah.
we were all country people, the farms
Yeah,
were in Fenton and you know, and my dad said it scared the heck out of them. And he got down, the kids had all piled on each other to peek through the window to see why they
right,
couldn't come in the house when the aunties were over.
right.
And I would have loved to known what was going on. But I
That
think
sounds
doing some of that, Rocky, maybe that's what happened with that house.
it could be. Well, I know my grandmother had a house in Detroit that was unbelievably haunted. You could hear phantom music through the house at all hours of the night.
My
People
God.
playing violins, and you'd hear music, you would hear footsteps. Sometimes you would hear like somebody dragging like trunks or furniture across the ceiling, and it was only a one floor because the attic you couldn't stand up right in it, and
Yes.
it sounded like somebody was dragging trunks through there. We all heard this. All of us, all of her grandkids heard this at one time or another. I remember there was a small child's telephone. You know, the ones that had the dial, and then when you push it, it made the
Yes.
dinging sound when it went back.
Yeah.
Well, we were
Yes.
all sitting in the bedroom. She had turned the whole front part into a bedroom that had like two big beds. It was kind of like a guest room. And there were some toys on the floor. We were teenagers at the time. And my cousin Teresa, who was older than she was the oldest, she had her daughter there and she had some little
Uh-huh.
toys. And we were all just sitting there talking. And all of a sudden, that that phone started doing it all by itself. It was the most amazing
Run.
thing I've ever seen in my life, and we all went running out of that room. I mean, we just left out of there as quickly as we could. And we
My
told
God.
my grandmother, and she went in there and she prayed, and then eventually her and the next door neighbor did something because she had pastors and priests and everything in there to bless that place, and it would stop, but then it would start back up like
And
a
then
few months later.
start back up.
Yeah, but yeah,
Oh
so
my God.
yeah, I know. I've seen some stuff myself. So,
Now, how long did that house stay in your family?
well, after my grandmother passed, my cousin, the one I was telling you about, she actually purchased the house, and then she turned that over to one of her daughters, and so it was there until it was finally she moved out, and then they purchased a whole bunch of homes on. They purchased like the whole block. This development company did, and they tore all those houses down. All those houses
Uh-huh.
got torn down and
Oh, it
cleared
got
out.
torn down.
Yeah, and I forget what they put in there. Haven't been down there in years to see where it actually used to sit, but it was off of Michigan Avenue, and close to the old Tiger Stadium. I mean, you could walk
Oh,
from my
okay.
grandmother's
Yes.
down to the old stadium down there.
Michigan and
Yeah,
that was what, fourth, I think. Michigan and fourth.
yeah. It was
Yeah.
the name of her street was Tillman. It was like Michigan
Tillman.
Avenue and Tillman.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes. Okay.
yeah,
Isn't
but
that something?
yeah, it's amazing, and that's really one of the reasons why I started this was to let people tell their stories so that they don't have to worry about anybody saying, "Ah, you're crazy, you dreamed all of
Yeah.
this," or whatever. I wanted a safe place for people to come and tell their stories because I've got stories. I mean that
Yes.
that and I always wanted to be able to find a place where I could share my stories at too without people going, thinking that there's something wrong with you or
Wrong with you. You're
whatever.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I know
exactly.
my whole family, when my grandma died, I wanted to buy the home and every last one of them because, I just, there were good memories in it of my
Yes.
grandma, but every one of them, you got the ick factor. Something was in that home. There
Yeah.
was something in that home. And I don't know if it was her and her sisters doing what they were doing and not knowing what
Yeah.
they were doing,
Yeah.
uh, you know, can cause, I think, cause things to happen. And, but I've seen it since, and, I don't feel that way. It's been so redone, and I don't know if construction and they tore the every room out they redid, and who knows. But I didn't have that feeling. Now maybe if I had been there alone, uh I could, but the realtor let me go through it.
Hmm.
But everyone that I knew, and my daughter just said, yeah, it was her too. I mean, you just felt uneasy in that home.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always felt like someone was right in my face staring at me because I couldn't see it, but I could feel it.
Yeah. Well, I know at my grandmother's place, there was one bedroom that nobody wanted to sleep in when they were there because it always felt like like you would lay down to close your eyes and you felt like somebody was like right here.
Right in your
Yeah,
face.
right in your face, like just looking at you.
Yes.
And nobody wanted to sleep in that room. It was like we'd rather sleep on the couch, instead of sleeping in that room. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
know that feeling. Yeah.
Yes. I had that. Oh my gosh, I had that. And I had to run down in the middle of the night to use that bathroom. And I swear there were many nights I just waited and waited till the sun came up, and then I'd go down there to that bathroom. So
Yes.
I know her and her sisters had some sort of, like you called it, table tipping. And
Yeah.
I don't know what else they did because they kept that between the girls.
Right.
Yeah, family secrets, if you will, but I don't believe in them. I think you should share them
I
because,
think so too. Yeah.
thank goodness, the step drag thing, my mother was 8 years old. We're talking when she's in her 60s and now realizing we both had the same
Sharing the
experience.
same experience. I know. That in a way that's kind of sad, that it took that long for her to like open up to you. So yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I'll tell you that I go with my gut. People ignore their gut. I believe my daughter and I both are empaths. We can go through places and I can say, no, I don't want to go there, or let's not go here, or we get the feelings, and it's more than a feeling, it's a warning. And my daughter has that, and I've always had, it's bizarre, but if I and my family believed in this because I was more open than what they were. If I dream something 3 times, then I believe in it. The power
Yeah.
of three, I don't know why. I dreamt 3 times about this little girl in a blue pinafore dress. I only saw the back of her head and the long banana curls.
Yeah.
When my father passed, she was staying with her aunt. My daughter was a little 3, 4 year old, and he died. And I was we were in the church, and her aunt got her all dressed up for the funeral. I turned around, and guess who the little girl was in the pinafore with the banana curls? It was my daughter.
Oh my gosh.
And a lot of times I can't see the face, but I
Okay.
turned and it was her. And I'd had that dream for 20 years. And
Holy smokes.
I have 2 more dreams that haven't come to fruition, and I can't see the person. I kind of have an idea, maybe I'm going to go visit somebody that's going to pass. It's a male. I don't know if it's who it is, but I go to that room, and there's all these people waiting out in the hallway that I haven't a clue who they are, but they're all angry and fighting, and families do that when someone's going to
Right.
pass.
Yeah.
I've had that dream now, I'd say 25 years, but I can't envision who is in that bed. And it'll come to me in time, and it's going to happen, and then I'll
Right.
know. Uh, but for me, it's the power of three. If I dream it 3 times. And like I say, with my dad and that furnace, I kept dreaming it every night. And I
Yeah,
said to my
that's
mom,
amazing. That's
I
amazing. He
said,
definitely was trying to get a message through to you,
yes,
you know. Yeah, so he
yeah,
saved, yeah, basically he
he
saved
saved
your mother's,
my
yeah,
family. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't remember because it's been many years ago, but something on that furnace, if she would have opened the thing to let the propane come in, it would have blown up. And the address that I kept dreaming, I wasn't even born then, with this farm that was down from the house my father built. And I don't remember the significance of that address, but my mother knew it right away. After my dad passed, I kept getting this set of numbers. And she knew exactly whose farm address that was. And I don't know if she ever contacted them. It was a different generation, farms,
right.
all the farms are gone now, in most of the areas. But she knew the address, and I don't know to this day what he was trying to relay.
Yeah, that's strange. Hmm.
Yeah. But I
Well,
really enjoyed talking with you,
this was a
Robert.
blast. Thank you so much.
Yes, I really did enjoy it, and I loved seeing Lucinda again. And
Yeah. Well, she was saying you guys should come out and visit,
I would
if you
love
guys get a
to.
chance. Yeah,
Yes, I'll
I
get a
should.
hold of her. I will get
Okay.
a hold of her.
Well,
Thank.
listen, I just want
Uh-huh.
to thank you too for coming on and sharing your stories, and they were wonderful. I mean, this was a really good time. I really enjoyed this a lot.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I did too, because I can talk to someone and not feel like I'm nuts, you know?
Exactly. I
Yeah.
totally understand where you're coming from, and I've shared similar experiences to what you shared. And Lucinda
Yeah.
has too.
She
So,
has.
oh
Oh,
yeah.
we're gonna get together and sit around and have a good talk. It'll
Yes,
be
we
fun.
will. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna
Okay.
let you go now. I'm gonna end, but
Okay.
but after I end the recording, stay on, okay? So
Oh,
don't
okay.
hang up yet. Don't hang up yet.
Okay.
But I just want
Okay.
to say thank you to my guest, Linda Richey, tonight, and for all the wonderful stories that she shared with us. Also, I'm looking for stories. If anybody has stories out there that they want to share on True Tales of the Supernatural, please contact me. You can contact me through Facebook or through my email, which is rainsrocky4@gmail.com. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next month.